Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, a deported illegal immigrant who lived in Maryland will not be sent back to the U.S. That's what the president of El Salvador tells President Trump as the two vow to step up mass deportations. How do they plan to cooperate? Iris Tao brings us the updates. That's as the U.S. deports more alleged foreign gang members to El Salvador. The South American country is now holding roughly 260 deportees from the U.S. in its maximum security prison. Jack Bradley with the details. U.S. forces reportedly strike more Houthi terrorist targets in Yemen. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have now blocked off part of the southern Gaza Strip. Jason Perry reports. Russia defends its airstrike on the Ukrainian city of Sumy, which reportedly killed over 30 civilians. Arian Pazdar has what Moscow says about the attack and how President Trump responds. The suspect who allegedly set fire to the Pennsylvania governor's mansion arraigned today on charges of attempted murder, aggravated arson, and terrorism, plus what Governor Josh Shapiro had to say about the attack.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. The two leaders seeing eye to eye on fighting illegal immigration and violent crime. President Trump met today with the president of El Salvador as they say they are not sending a deported man back to the U.S. despite pressure from courts. NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao has more.
How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him.
An illegal immigrant deported back to his home country, El Salvador, is not coming back to the U.S. That's what Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele told President Trump today at an Oval Office meeting. Bukele has become a strong Trump ally for taking in hundreds of alleged illegal criminals deported by the U.S. into his country's mega prison.
And you are helping us out, and we appreciate it. Thanks.
Bukele is known for cracking down on gangs and drastically lowering crime in his home country. He says to Trump,
"You have to imprison them so you can liberate 350 million Americans that are asking for the end of crime."
Bukele's indication that he's not sending back Kilmar Abrego Garcia comes as the Trump administration has been defending the man's deportation in courts and in public. The U.S. government deported Garcia back to El Salvador despite a court order saying he might be subject to harm there. While his U.S. citizen wife says he's not a gang member, White House officials say he is, and that a Supreme Court order to facilitate his return does not mean that they must get him back.
Stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children.
And now President Trump eyeing to send more illegal criminals to El Salvador.
As many as possible.
And potentially even criminals who are U.S. citizens.
They're as bad as anybody that comes in. We have bad ones too. And I'm all for it.
Meanwhile, on tariffs, President Trump on Monday signaled that he might give exemptions to car parts.
I don't change my mind, but I'm flexible. We lost with China over the Biden years trillions of dollars on trade. Trillions of dollars. And he let them fleece us. And we can't do that anymore.
And President Trump also says that tariffs on pharmaceuticals and semiconductors are coming soon. The vice president warning today that the U.S. must have what we need if, God forbid, we had to fight a war. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Just prior to the Salvadoran president's White House visit, the U.S. deported 10 more alleged gang members to El Salvador's maximum security prison. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
The U.S. deported 10 alleged Venezuelan and Salvadorian gang members to El Salvador this weekend. That's just before the president of El Salvador paid a visit to the White House. Secretary of State Marco Rubio made the announcement on Sunday, saying the move shows security and prosperity in the hemisphere. The deportees were booked into the notorious terrorism confinement center, where their heads were shaved, and they were taken to prison cells. Last month, the Trump administration struck a deal with El Salvador to pay $6 million to hold around 300 alleged gang members for 1 year. Now, the Trump administration has already sent roughly 260 deportees there, but there's still thousands left to deport.
There are thousands of either trained Nicaragua members left in this country or their affiliates and associates. So obviously some portion of those will be going to El Salvador as part of our effort to eradicate this foreign terrorist organization from the United States. But there's no upper limit to the agreement. We're going to continue to send foreign terrorist aliens to El Salvador as well as to many other countries.
The U.S. has designated both the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua and the Salvadorian gang MS-13 as terrorist organizations. Now, this allows the U.S. to deport illegal immigrants that are part of these groups without a legal process. The Trump administration said that the gang members are conducting a form of modern warfare. And with Tren de Aragua in particular, they're accused of working with the Maduro regime to infiltrate the U.S. to commit crimes. Both gangs have long been linked to multiple murders, theft, and drug and human trafficking. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Harvard University officials today rejected the Trump administration's demands to make sweeping changes to its governance, admissions, and hiring practices. Harvard is the first school to push back against the government's efforts to bring about changes, and it has the most funding potentially at stake. The Trump administration announced recently it was reviewing $9 billion in contracts and grants for the university. The requested changes come after intense protests last year over the Israel-Hamas war fueled concerns of anti-Semitism on campuses. Other changes relate to ending DEI programs and topics surrounding gender identity ideology. The U.S. military is keeping up the pressure on the Houthi terrorist group in Yemen as more strikes were reported in the country. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have established a corridor in the Gaza Strip, blocking off part of the south. NTD's Jason Perry has the Middle East update.
Sailors in the United States Navy were seen preparing munitions aboard a U.S. aircraft carrier. In a video released on Monday, the United States Central Command, or CENTCOM, said they were preparing for operations against the Iran-backed Houthi terrorist group in Yemen. And just the day before, a Houthi-run health ministry said U.S. airstrikes in Yemen killed at least 6 people and wounded 30. The U.S. says the strikes on the Houthis are to defend American interests, deter enemies, and restore freedom of navigation. The Houthis have carried out more than 100 attacks on ships in the Red Sea, saying they are in support of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Israel's President Isaac Herzog met on Monday with family members of 2 hostages who have been held in the Gaza Strip for over a year and a half now.
And we are all here praying, hoping, yearning, and calling for their immediate return from the dungeons of Gaza. We want to see them here, and we are calling upon the entire world leadership to bring them and all other hostages back home immediately.
This comes as Israeli forces have also been trying to free the hostages militarily. Over the weekend, Israeli forces reported establishing a corridor separating the southern Gaza city of Rafah from Khan Yunis. And Israeli troops have been operating in this area, also known as the Morag Corridor. Israel has said they plan to seize large parts of the Gaza Strip to help free remaining hostages. And on Sunday, the Israeli Air Force reported striking 90 terror targets throughout the Gaza Strip in 48 hours. Some residents in Gaza City said they don't have the tools they need to rescue people from under the rubble.
There is no equipment. If there was equipment, we would have maybe rescued 80% of those alive from under the rubble. We were pulling out people who died in our own hands. We pulled out 3 people who we had to amputate their legs ourselves to get them out alive.
Meanwhile, President Trump on Monday commented on the recent talks with Iran on a possible nuclear deal. He said he thinks Iran is intentionally delaying a deal with the United States. He also said Iran must give up their ambitions to get a nuclear weapon or face military strikes on their nuclear facilities. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Russia defends a deadly attack on the Ukrainian city of Sumy. The Sunday attack reportedly killed at least 34 civilians. Moscow has responded by saying it strikes only military targets. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the war update.
Cleanup efforts are still ongoing on Monday after a Russian attack reportedly killed 34 civilians in the Ukrainian city of Sumy.
It hurts. Every Ukrainian is hurt. Sumy is a target every day. It hurts. It's scary to be here, but there's nowhere else where I can find myself.
Russia says its missiles hit a meeting of Ukrainian military officers in Sumy. Russia's defense ministry accuses Ukraine of using civilians as human shields. That's by placing military facilities and holding events in the center of a densely populated city. The Kremlin says Sunday's attack killed more than 60 Ukrainian soldiers.
The international humanitarian law strongly forbids to deploy military facilities and weapons on the territory of the civilian sites.
The leaders of Britain, Germany, and Italy condemned the attack. Ukraine called for a strong international response against Moscow. On Sunday, Trump described the attack as a horrible thing, saying it was a mistake. On Monday, he was asked what he meant by calling it a mistake.
The mistake was letting the war happen. I went 4 years and Putin wouldn't even bring it up. And as soon as the election was rigged and I wasn't here, that war started.
But Trump added that he's still confident a solution to the conflict will be found.
We got to solve a war that should have never started, Ukraine and Russia, and we'll get that solved.
And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday, saying pressure on Russia has to be increased in order for the fighting to stop.
Перемовини і дипломатія не дадуть результату.
They are not afraid in Moscow right now. And if there is not enough pressure on Russia, they will continue to do what they are used to do, continue to fight.
He added that his office is planning meetings with international allies regarding peacekeepers in Ukraine to guarantee stability after the fighting ends. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
The man accused of setting the Pennsylvania governor's residence on fire was arraigned moments ago. The Sunday blaze caused significant damage and forced Governor Josh Shapiro, his family, and guests to evacuate the building.
Reporting a large fire in the dining room on the first floor. They can see fire out the windows. G5, it sounds like you're on fire.
But we do know that this attack was targeted. We don't know the person's specific motive yet, but we do know a few truths. First, this type of violence is not okay.
Shapiro said they were awakened by state troopers pounding on their doors at about 2 a.m. Sunday. No one was injured. Authorities said Cody Balmer scaled a nearly 7-foot-high iron security fence, eluded officers, and forcibly entered the residence before setting it on fire with Molotov cocktails. Police said the 38-year-old suspect appeared to have carefully planned the attack and that he was inside the residence for about a minute before he escaped. According to court documents, Balmer told police he had planned to beat Shapiro with a hammer if he encountered him while inside. President Trump condemned the attack. Balmer's mother told CBS News that she had reached out to police before the incident. She told the outlet, quote, "So he was mentally ill, went off his meds, and this is what happened." Balmer faces charges including attempted murder, terrorism, aggravated arson, and aggravated assault. The National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, gave an update today on the fatal helicopter crash on the Hudson River last week. Take a listen.
Aircraft recovery experts have arrived on scene. They arrived a few hours ago. They're currently working on the extraction of the aircraft itself. We anticipate this will be concluded by tomorrow evening, at which point the wreckage will all be moved to a secure facility in Massachusetts, where part of our team will relocate in order to do a more thorough examination of the aircraft itself and the structure. We've also received from the FAA ADSB data. This is Automated Detection Surveillance Broadcast. It's commonly referred to as ADSB. We have received that data from the FAA, and that gives us a much greater fidelity of information regarding altitude, speed, location, trajectory. It will be overlaid with a number of the other parts of our investigation, including the air traffic control radar information. As part of the FAA review, we will also be doing video replays of the actual ATC, or air traffic control scopes, that were being seen at the time.
New York Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch said the helicopter took off around 3 p.m. Thursday and flew north along the Hudson. After reaching the George Washington Bridge, it turned south and crashed shortly afterwards. Footage showed the aircraft plunge into the water about 15 minutes later. The crash killed a family of 5 and the pilot. And the helicopter company involved in that deadly Hudson River crash is shutting down operations, plus what we know about another fatal plane crash this weekend.
The Federal Aviation Administration said Sunday New York Helicopter Tours was shutting down their operations immediately. The FAA said it would launch a review of the company's license and safety record. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said Sunday the company's operating certificate needed to be removed. He said New York's helicopter tour companies, quote, have a deadly track record in that they manipulate FAA rules and cut corners. The National Transportation Safety Board said earlier the helicopter was not equipped with flight records. The NTSB said the chopper that crashed had its last major inspection at the beginning of March. New York Helicopter Tours was previously involved in 2 safety incidents in 2013 and 2015. The company's CEO did not immediately respond to a request for comment. And on Saturday, a plane crash killed 6 people, including a former star student athlete. According to the FAA and the NTSB, their small Mitsubishi Mu-2B aircraft crashed into a field in Copake, New York around noon.
The scene is approximately 100 yards in length, with the aircraft being compressed, buckled, and embedded into the terrain. And we have recovered and obtained at this point a video of the actual crash. It appears to show that the aircraft was intact and crashed at a high rate of descent into the ground.
The NTSB said the plane was attempting to land at Columbia Airport, 50 miles south of Albany.
During the approach at Columbia County Airport, the pilot reported a missed approach. He requested vectors for another approach, and as he is being vectored, the radar indicated a low altitude alert.
The NTSB said the pilot did not respond to the alert and there was no distress call. NCAA Woman of the Year and former MIT soccer player Corinna Groff, her brother Jared, and parents Dr. Michael Groff and Dr. Joy Saini were on board and died in the crash. Corinna and Jared's partners James Santoro and Alexia Duarte were killed as well.
A 5.2 magnitude earthquake shook the San Diego area today just after 10 a.m. local time. The U.S. Geological Survey said the quake originated at a depth of more than 8 miles. The San Diego County Sheriff's Department said it received no immediate reports of damage or injuries. The tremors were felt as far north as Los Angeles. California Governor Gavin Newsom's office said the state was working with local authorities to determine the extent of the impact. We'll have more details as this story develops. Coming up, Nvidia will make AI supercomputers in the U.S. a first for the company, and smartphones getting a break from tariffs. Kevin Hogan brings us the numbers around big shakeups in the tech sphere. And a federal judge says Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency may access sensitive data at the Treasury Department. Jason Blair has more on the case after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Big shifts happening in tech. Nvidia will make AI supercomputers in the U.S. This is a first for the company. And President Trump is exempting phones and computers from reciprocal tariffs, but says he'll put tariffs on semiconductors soon. Why is he doing that? And when can we expect Nvidia to ramp up production of these supercomputers? Our data reporter Kevin Hogan has the details.
Well, let's look into that. So this is a map of the United States. Made in the USA is what President Trump wants and what he's hoping for with these tariffs. Nvidia is working with TSMC, the Taiwan company, as well as Foxconn and so others, to create these Blackwell chips. These are GPUs, graphics processors that train AI. So they're doing that in Phoenix. And then in Dallas and Houston, that's where they're going to make these AI supercomputers. This is very high-tech stuff. I mean, this is 200 billion transistors, and there's Blackwell chips and so on. Again, this is not being made overseas. This is being made right here. Could be because of those tariffs that they would have to pay if they weren't making it on American soil. And that mass production, they say, is going to start within about a year, or it could be up to 15 months, right? So in that time frame, that's when you can see these chips and AI computers really starting to be churned out. Okay, so now you talked about the electronics that are not going to have those tariffs. This is cell phones, think iPhone, right? A lot of that stuff is made in China. So Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, and iPhone lovers, you can rejoice because those product prices are not going to probably go up quite as much as we thought, and we're going to get into that. So this is all according to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the list they put out of those 20 electronics, right? And this ranges from everything. These are LCD screens, those flat screens, software, routers, all this, hard disks, even, your storage devices, all that coming from, even from solar panels to laptops, as we mentioned, and so on. These are the 20 electronics that are not going to be hit with those specific types of tariffs. You might ask, well, why is it? But first, Apple stock took a huge drop, and that was on what President Trump calls Liberation Day. You could probably guess that's right here, right? So April 2nd, that's when Trump put all those reciprocal tariffs on. What happened right after that? Immediately, that's $600 billion that Apple's market capitalization was just vanished in just a few days, right? It was able to recoup that. So again, its stock price went from about $220 down to, let's say, $180, and then it's come up back past $200. Now, it's possible that with a little bit more of these, tariff, hold off on this tariffs for a little while. Investors could look on that, and maybe it'll recoup a little bit more of that. But again, yes, why is President Trump making these products, a lot of them, again, made in China, exempt? Well, it's probably to give these companies a little bit more time to reinvest in the United States. And here's what the Deputy Press Secretary has told CNBC. We're going to take a look at that. At the direction of the president, these companies are hustling to onshore their manufacturing in the United States as soon as possible. So that's the motivation behind it. Again, these smartphones tariffs, they could show up at later time, but it's just so that these companies have a little bit more time to reinvest in the United States, as President Trump might hope. Because again, this is Apple's production in China, from 0 to 100%. Their total overall production capacity is 80% in China. And then their iPhones, they make 90% of them all over there, and then Macs more than half, iPads, talking 80%. So they make a lot of their products in China, and if they were to make them in the United States, they could bypass those tariffs. Now, they have other options. They could build it in, say, Vietnam. That's a place where they make a lot of their wearables, like the iPhone, or the iWatch and so forth. So they could either bypass all of it by going to the United States or other countries. Now, you might remember back in 2023, Tim Cook, the CEO, said that 95% of all of their products are made in China. So again, this is Evercore ISI data. It's a little bit of discrepancy with what Tim Cook said. The point is, Apple makes a lot of its products in China. That said, we now understand that what we reported before at the time was true, that the iPhone products, this 16 Pro Max 265 gigabytes, which is made in China, was going to jump up over 50% to $1,800 or so. But that is not going to happen because these products are exempt from those tariffs. So it's still going to hover about $1,100. Very expensive, but that's a high-end model. And now the ones from India, same problem. Same situation here. It's not going to go up, 12%. It's still going to hover at about $1,000. But again, that's still very, very expensive. But you're talking about high-tech products, right? So that's a summary of what's happening with these tariffs at President Trump's direction. Back to you.
Democratic lawmakers are accusing Republicans of insider trading and call for an investigation into the president's tariff policies. NTD's Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on the story.
We are a separate and equal branch of government. The Constitution lays out very clearly that Congress is not supposed to be spineless and submissive. It is supposed to hold up oversight over the president.
Senator Cory Booker has called for congressional hearings to investigate the president's tariff policies and whether or not people close to the White House had access to privileged information.
One day it's on, one day it's off. One day certain items are on, the next day it's off. And you see that a lot of people made a lot of money on the actual stock market over the last couple of weeks on this information. I think at a minimum, the administration owes it to us.
In the House, Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia has accused fellow Republican lawmakers of insider trading and also of working to cut Medicaid and Social Security benefits.
Over 100,000 residents right here in AZ06 would lose Medicaid coverage. They better be afraid of the reaction of the regular people in AZ06 and other districts like it around the country if they don't start standing up to Donald Trump and fighting for health care and Social Security.
They're cutting Medicaid in order to finance tax cuts for the wealthiest people who are also engaged in market manipulation right now.
Despite the accusations, Republican leadership in the House and the Senate maintain their commitment to protecting people's benefits.
Have said that we're going to gut Medicaid. It is not true. We're going to protect the benefits that everyone is legally entitled to.
We are all aligned on the need to make the 2017 Trump tax cuts permanent, to restore American energy dominance, to grow our economy, and to make a generational investment in our border security. And also,
Republicans in the House and in the Senate have also joined Democrats to push for legislation that will provide congressional oversight over the president's tariff policies.
Let me just say that I support the president 100% when it comes to the critical goals that he's talking about: onshoring, critical manufacturing, growing American jobs, ensuring fair trade, and making sure that markets abroad are a good place for the sale of U.S. goods. I just think we need to make sure we do it in the right way. And Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution is clear on this. Congress has the power to impose tariffs.
Congress is in recess until April 28th. Republicans will then have less than 1 month to pass a reconciliation bill before their own self-imposed Memorial Day deadline. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
A judge partially lifts a ban on DOGE access to the Treasury Department's payment systems. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the update from Washington, D.C.
A New York federal judge has eased a ban keeping DOGE from accessing sensitive data at the Treasury Department. One condition is only one staffer from DOGE can access the payment systems at the Treasury Department, and this staffer must first also go through the standard hands-on training that Treasury Department employees go through, as well as submit a financial disclosure report. And this is involving a suit back in February. 19 states sued, trying to block DOGE, saying that they pose a privacy and cybersecurity threat and should not be given access to sensitive data. The American Library Association, along with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Union, sued to block DOGE's efforts to downsize the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or IMLS. The lawsuit says without grant funding or IMLS staff to process reimbursements, local and state libraries will suffer an immediate and irreparable inability to pay vendors or staff hired in reliance on IMLS's promise to make these reimbursements. And IMLS provides important day-to-day services and advice to libraries across the country, which has already ceased, causing irreparable harm. Last month, President Trump signed an executive order to significantly downsize IMLS and other federal agencies. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg took the stand today at a high-stakes trial in Washington. The Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, is accusing the Facebook parent company of creating a social network monopoly. It alleges Meta bought Instagram and WhatsApp a decade ago to eliminate competition among social media platforms, and it wants Meta to either restructure or sell Instagram and WhatsApp. Today is the first of what's expected to be 2 days of testimony for Zuckerberg, who will defend two of his company's most important acquisitions. How users spend time on social media and which services they consider interchangeable will be core to the case. Meta has argued that it faces direct competition from ByteDance's TikTok, Google's YouTube, and Apple's messaging app. But the FTC claims that Meta holds a monopoly on platforms used to share content with friends and family. Its main competitors in the U.S. are Snapchat and MeWe, a tiny privacy-focused social media app launched in 2016. Platforms where users broadcast content to strangers based on shared interests, such as X, TikTok, YouTube, and Reddit, are not interchangeable. The trial could stretch into July. The breakup would be a financial hit to Meta, which earns about half of its U.S. advertising revenue from Instagram. Coming up, who has the final say in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an alleged gang member deported back to his home country of El Salvador? Two attorneys join us to discuss after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. At a White House meeting today, the Salvadoran president told President Trump that Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a man deported back to his home country of El Salvador, will not be returned to the U.S. Abrego Garcia was arrested in Maryland by Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents. White House officials said he's an illegal immigrant and accused him of being a member of MS-13. Joining us now to discuss these latest developments is civil and criminal defense attorney Dante Mills. He's the lead attorney and managing partner at Mills Legal LLC. And we're also joined by Gerard Filitti, Senior Counsel at the Lawfare Project. He's an attorney specializing in national security law and policy and counterterrorism. Good to have you both back with us. Now, Dante, El Salvador's leader, Nayib Bukele, saying today to a reporter, quote, "You're suggesting I smuggle a terrorist into the United States. I'm not going to do that." Meanwhile, Senator Chris Van Hollen requested a meeting today with Bukele to discuss Abrego Garcia's return. Does Bukele's response effectively end this case?
I think this is not only embarrassing. I think it's very sad for this nation to take the stance that we don't care what happened to people. He was not here illegally. He had a withholding of removal status. He did not commit a crime. There's no allegation that he committed a crime. And the administration admitted that they removed him in error. However, they did not simply remove him from the United States. They sent him to a prison, a maximum security prison that's reserved for terrorists and terrorism and gang members. There's no indication that he deserves to be there. And now the White House is being cute and saying, well, we can't get him back because the president of El Salvador is saying, he's not going to do that. Well, President Trump takes this bold stance in any other platform. And in fact, President Zelensky came to the White House and the administration beat him down for standing up for his people to President Trump. However, they're going to tell me that the president of El Salvador can come in and say, no, we're not going to give him back. And that's simply okay, that the White House doesn't have the authority to say, hey, give this guy back because he shouldn't be there in the first place. It's a life that people are playing with. It has to be taken seriously. And I think this is a very serious situation that everybody should be concerned about.
And Gerard, what do you make of the developments today? Is this the end of what we're seeing with this case?
I don't think it's the end by far. I think what will happen next is we will see an inquiry into whether President Trump and the Trump administration has done what it needs to do to fulfill the Supreme Court's order that it facilitate the return of this man. Now, facilitate doesn't mean necessarily effectuated. It's a different concept. It's not, the Supreme Court did not order Donald Trump to do everything in the administration's power to get this man back. So the burden really will be on the Trump administration to satisfy the Supreme Court that it has done enough, meaning that it asked for the return of this person and that El Salvador refused, and that this is all that it can do. That would end this case. But in the meantime, we still are open to discussion as to what is enough and how much does the administration have to do to satisfy the Supreme Court in trying to get this man back.
And Dante,
I think it's ridiculous for us to, if I can say, I just think it's ridiculous for us to say that the administration at some point can do enough to try to get him back. We are paying them, El Salvador, about $6 million to run these facilities. And the White House today, President Trump said that he wants him to build a couple more because he wants to send homegrown people, United States citizens, to that prison. So it's not a situation where President Trump doesn't have control enough to demand that he comes back. Now, the Supreme Court couldn't put that in a decision because it impacts foreign policy. And the Supreme Court could not say, we're demanding that you bring him back, because what if that does cause a war or something like that? The Supreme Court doesn't have the authority. But there's no reason for us to sit here and act as if President Trump could not, in one phone call, in one tweet, or whatever it is, say we want him back, and it doesn't happen because the El Salvadorian president will listen to him. This is not happening because they don't want it to, and they're playing with the man's life, and that's just sad.
I want to dig into kind of what both sides are arguing here. Of course, the U.S. has been alleging that Abrego Garcia is a MS-13 gang member, which is now a designated terrorist organization. They're saying, hence the prioritized deportation, adding that since he's in El Salvador, he is now under Bukele's purview. The defense, of course, argues there's no proof he's MS-13, and that the Supreme Court, as you've been saying, has asked the U.S. government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. Now, Gerard, going to you, in your view, what ultimately is at the heart of this case? Who has the say here? Is it the U.S. or El Salvador?
Well, ultimately, it is El Salvador. That is who has physical control of this person. And for whatever reason, they can refuse, and they have been refusing. Now, whether or not it's accurate that Donald Trump can do more, I think that's an open question. And of course, there's a lot more that he could do should he choose to. But ultimately, the Supreme Court, the legal system, the Article 3 judges do not have that power to compel the executive to do things that are contrary to its direction of national security and foreign affairs. That is solely within the purview of the executive branch of the Trump administration. So there's that fine line between facilitating the return of this person to U.S. jurisdiction, which Donald Trump does not have personal control over, and interfering with the rights of the executive branch to conduct foreign policy and national security. Ultimately, the issue here is we don't want to be deporting people with haste. We want to make sure that there is process, that they have an opportunity to be heard. The Supreme Court made that abundantly clear last week in a different case, but also related to the Enemy Aliens Act. In this case, it seems that those procedures were not followed. Now, we don't know if it's too late to bring this man back or not, but the important thing to realize here is that going forward, the government has a heavier burden to make sure that it does not wrongly deport people. And the eyes of the world, the eyes of the media, and the eyes of the legal system are watching the administration.
And Dante, on that note, what do you see as next in this case?
It depends on what kind of person Donald Trump truly is. It's embarrassing, but if he has no heart, if he has no empathy, if he is willing to allow someone who was here legally, who did not commit a crime, and in fact, I don't want to follow that narrative that he may be a terrorist because the administration said he was deported in error. They didn't start calling him that until after the fact when we're in this situation where he's sitting in a maximum security prison in another country. But if Donald Trump has any heart, any empathy, he will realize that he's putting someone's life at risk. He could die in that prison. And that's going to be on this administration. Deport him out of this country if you want, but to send him to a prison with no due process at all, with no facts at all, no evidence at all, is wrong. And if we have a president that wants to represent just people in general, forget politics. If we have a president that doesn't want somebody to die unnecessarily, make a phone call. That's all he has to do. And the president of El Salvador will listen to him. And if he tells us that he won't, that El Salvador is refusing, that's ridiculous and unbelievable because we know what the power of this office yields, the power of this office yields. So I'm asking him to have a heart, not to put someone's life in danger unnecessarily. When you made a mistake, correct your mistake, get him home. It's the right thing to do.
And Gerard, on that deportation aspect, CNN and other reports are noting that Abrego Garcia entered the U.S. illegally back in 2011. An immigration judge ruled in 2019 that he could not be removed to El Salvador as he could face threats from rival gangs there, but he could be deported to another country. What other country could he have been sent to?
Well, that's a good question, and this is where foreign policy comes into effect, and the United States does have and maintain relations with other countries that have periodically taken citizens of other nations when they are expelled from the United States. This is a matter of routine, or it has been with several administrations. And ultimately, you did identify what the problem is. This is not an American citizen. This is not someone who was in the country illegally. That he was allowed to stay pending deportation proceedings to be transferred to another country does not give him the same legal status that he would have had he come here legally. So ultimately, we are dealing with illegal immigration. We are dealing with people who have no right to be here. And while it's certainly a morally sad story that this person was deported, we also have to remember that this is the law. This is the proper execution of the law. The Supreme Court has said as much. And the issue here is whether this man can be returned and face process. Let's also point out, if he is returned and he faces process, he is likely to be sent out of the country again to another country. It's not that he's being brought back to live his life in the United States. So this is really cynical to say, let's bring him back so we can deport him all over again.
And Dante,
no, he's not
quickly.
illegal. Let's clear that up. Yeah, very quickly. He's not illegal. He was here legally under that status, and he was attending those meetings, doing everything he had to do. And he was sent to a prison. He wasn't just expelled from the United States. So if he comes here and is legally expelled, okay. But he's sent to a prison where his life is in danger, and that's a problem.
Dante Mills, Gerard Filitti, as always, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, a new California bill could give homeless college students a safer place to sleep right on campus. The bill would allow them to stay overnight in their cars. And in golf news, an emotional Rory Mcilroy wins his first Masters title to complete a career Grand Slam. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. California's housing crisis is forcing some college students to live in their cars. Now, a proposed measure would allow them to sleep overnight on campus if the bill can survive the opposition. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more from Los Angeles.
With California's ongoing housing crisis, several college students are now living in their vehicles. But a new state law aims to let students park and sleep overnight in their cars on campus. The proposal would apply to community colleges and California State University campuses. Democratic Assembly member Corey Jackson introduced the bill that would require community colleges and Cal State campuses to implement overnight parking programs for students. Without such programs, students often resort to sleeping in their cars off campus, which can be unsafe and unwelcome. 1 in 4 California community college students experienced homelessness in 2024. We asked several Cal State Los Angeles students their thoughts on the proposed bill.
I think this bill it's kind of understandable because housing in LA is like terrible, and especially like the fact that like people need to get to school, and especially Cal State LA is not like I guess it's a cheaper school, so I feel like a lot of people here are not like the richest. So I understand that whole thing about like staying in your car and like living there for now just to get to class early.
Our commute here is so hard. Like, this is a #1 commuter school, and I can understand like maybe you had like a late lab one night and then you have an early lecture in the morning. It's honestly probably safer if they sleep here than having someone drive on the road who's super tired.
Last year, 4,000 Cal State students were on housing wait lists, and most community colleges offer little or no student housing. Colleges like Long Beach Community College have already implemented safe parking programs. The bill offers a temporary fix as long-term housing plans develop. But with California rents 30% above the national average, Jackson argues the need is urgent. However, the bill faces opposition from the California State University and community college systems, which cite funding and logistical challenges. Jackson says colleges should help with the housing crisis and is willing to waive liability and delay the plan until funding is available. The bill passed its first committee, and Jackson remains hopeful that it will reach Governor Gavin Newsom's desk. Reporting from the city of Los Angeles, Christina Corona, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on right now, including your new background. But let's start in golf, as Rory Mcilroy is fresh off his Masters Championship, a very emotional win. What did this mean to him?
Yeah, this was a huge relief for sure. This was his first major championship in more than a decade. It was very emotional. He had not won a major since 2014. Now by 2014, he had already won 4. He was just 25 years old. I mean, you could say he was on pace to possibly catch Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus, who are 15 and 18 respectively. Instead, he stayed at 4 for the last 10 years. But also, this completes a career Grand Slam for him, one of just 6 players to win all 4 of the golf's majors. And it wasn't easy. You know, he had a great round Friday and Saturday. There's Justin Rose right there who he was hugging. Rose led after the first round. Then Rose came back Sunday while trailing to start the day. McIlroy had to hold him off at the end, but he did it. So congratulations to McIlroy.
Looking at NBA news, the Phoenix Suns fired head coach Mike Budenholzer a day after the season ended, and with the team out of playoff contention, was this a surprise?
You know, it wasn't a big surprise. I mean, the Suns actually had the highest payroll, not only in the NBA this year, but in NBA history, more than $210 million. But the team, unfortunately, did not make the playoffs, didn't even make the play-in round. And that's despite having an 8-1 start to the season. So they had a great start. Really, certainly the second half, since the All-Star break, just 10 and 18 there, and they fell out of the playoff race there. Now, this is actually the 3rd straight offseason that Phoenix will be replacing their head coach. I wouldn't be surprised if they'd retool the roster here, too. You got those 3 All-Stars, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to trade 1 or 2 of those guys to try to retool things. Probably Durant is the most likely. You probably would bring the most, even though he's the oldest. I would think they want Booker since he's the youngest there. So I wouldn't be surprised if Phoenix makes some big decisions come this offseason.
And how does this play-in round work? I know you've described it as confusing before.
Yeah, it's very confusing when you first look, at least for me, every time I first looked at it. But now that I've actually understood it, it actually does make sense. You basically have 4 teams in each conference vying for the final 2 playoff spots. So the teams that finish 7th through 10th in this final standings in both conferences, looking for those final 2 spots. So tomorrow night, Tuesday night, you're going to teams, the 7th and 8th seeds, we'll call them, playing each other in both conferences. The winners of those games automatically make it as the official seed in the playoffs. So they're already in, but the loser isn't out. Then Wednesday night, you've got the teams that are 9th and 10th in the conference. They're playing. The loser of that game is eliminated. The winner hasn't quite got in yet. The winner of that game plays then the loser of the 7 versus 8 seed that plays tonight. And then the winner of that game gets in as the official 8 seed. So basically, if you win Tuesday night, you're in the playoffs, because those are the 7 and 8 seeds. But that team, the losers, can still make it if they win their second game. The 9 versus 10 team on Wednesday night, they got to win twice, and they finally get in as the, if they're going to get in, they get in as the 8 seed, if they do that. So hopefully you got all that too.
So some second and third chances potentially.
Second chances for sure going on.
Shifting gears to the NHL, though, with just 4 days left in the regular season, where do things stand as far as who's in and out of the playoffs?
Yeah, this is actually the first year that the 4 American teams of the original 6 NHL teams will all miss the playoffs. That's Detroit, Chicago, Boston, and the New York Rangers. All those teams out. Now, the 2 Canadian teams of those original 6, Toronto, they're already in. Montreal is still in play. They actually play Chicago tonight. If they win tonight, they are in the playoffs, in their final spot in the East. Now in the West, we got 3 teams left for 2 spots. That's Minnesota and St. Louis, as well as Calgary. Now Minnesota and St. Louis have more points than Calgary, but they each have 1 game left. Calgary has 2 games left. All 3 of those teams play Tuesday night, and then Calgary plays again Thursday night. That is the final night of the NHL's regular season, and then next week, the NHL playoff starts. So the NBA playoff starts this Saturday, and then the NHL starts just a couple days after that. So a big week for hockey and basketball fans.
Well, you'll be busy, Dave, as always. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.